This is a meeting about the rules of the game. And that is always the most important thing a citizenry can talk about. The rules of the game are always more important than any given roll of the dice or turn of the card. If we can have the right process in our millions as Canadians, we can be reasonably comfortable with what's going to come out the other end. And at the moment, we have a process that is not, as others have said, working well. You know, when you hear these descriptions of how direct democracy might work, you say to yourself, this is so sensible. What is the problem? I suggest to you there are three problems, and I'll talk briefly about the first two and at greater length about the third. The first is exactly what John Kelly said. Sovereignty in our system of government does not lie with the people, in theory. Perhaps, in fact, it is coming to be, and that is one of the great developments of the 20th century for Canadian democracy. But in theory, sovereignty still remains in the Queen and Parliament, sitting as a unit. And those folks believe that. That is one of the problems. The second problem is the ideas of direct democracy are somewhat new, at least to us in Canada. They are well tried in other parts of the world, and therefore it is part of the task of those of us who believe in these things to try and explain why it will work well here. The third problem is what I call the gatekeepers to reform. The very people who can make direct democracy possible in Canada, in all of our jurisdictions, are those who are most worried about it. And I'm talking about our politicians. You can tell a lot about a politician in their view of this subject of direct democracy. If they are kind of open to the concept, not necessarily enthusiastic, but say, yes, it has its uses and I can see its place here and there, then that is a test that allows you to say, well, I think this man and woman or woman probably has the interests of the public somewhere close to their heart. And if they strenuously resist it and say, no, this is not a part of our system, this is not appropriate in the way we do business, then you can be pretty sure that that man or woman is involved in protecting their agenda, not yours. There are so far lamentably few of the first type of politician.
I think in general we have a reasonable system in the parliamentary voting system where you can recall an MLA or an MP at the end of a maximum of 5 years. Usually the votes occur more often than that. It seems appealing, of course, to be able to recall somebody if the population disagrees with them on a specific issue. Mm-hmm. But there's some dangers in that. We designed our system the way it is so that we would get not only representation but some leadership too. Yeah.
By reminding you that in the 1800s, virtually every British House of Commoner was against the extension of the voting franchise to the working class. In the early years of this century, virtually every male politician in the world was against the extension of the vote to women. And it is only within the last couple of generations that we in Canada have extended the vote to Native peoples. And yet today we say, how could anyone have possibly held the contrary view? So it shows how there can be a sea change in attitude so quickly, and that's part of our job. It's clearly good for better government in the sense of politicians being more responsive. If you know that the folks back home, the people out there, and it's always out there when you're sitting in Ottawa, the people out there might be able to do something. If you don't, they might be able to mount a recall petition, they might be able to mount an initiative which would make you look like you were following the pack rather than leading it, then this gives a habit of mind. It doesn't necessarily require the people to actually do anything, but to simply have that power requires politicians to adopt a habit of mind that says every day, what are they thinking? And this is useful, in my opinion. Yes, direct democracy is a good thing for our democratic society in terms of a more involved electorate. I was at a forum the other day organized by Peter MacDonald and heard the counter-argument to this, which was interesting. One gentleman in the audience said, I take it he was of a libertarian cast of mind, I'm not sure. He said to the speaker, who was talking in part about direct democracy, look, I just want to get government out of my life. What are you bothering me for by asking me all these referendum questions? And that is one perspective. But I think the better perspective is that our system only works for us if we do take the time and we do have the machinery to have some impact on this.
And sometimes you want an elected representative to seize the bull by the horns, so to speak, and tackle a tough issue and come out with a leadership position. And sometimes when that happens, the public isn't automatically going to agree right away.
Mm-hmm. It requires an admission that there might be another answer, even a better answer. And this builds a kind of a bunker mentality, which starts with the proposition that we know what is right, went through that a minute ago, and then goes through the following logic. The opposition hates us, the press doesn't understand, and now even the people don't understand, and therefore, clearly, they're not to be trusted. We've got to do the following two things. We've got to finish our program so it's clearly good, and then we've got to communicate our program, because the problem is always we don't communicate well enough and the people don't understand yet. And yet usually the people understand very well. And the thing that is lacking here is a humility. Politicians are worried about direct democracy because they feel the world is uncontrollable enough already. And it is. And they don't want one more item of uncertainty out there that leads to a loss of time. There's always delays in direct democracy, uncertainty of results, and therefore, in their view, inefficiency. They're worried about losing control, appearing to lose control, because there's this kind of macho thing in Canadian politics and British Columbia politics where you can't make mistakes. You always got to be the boss. You got to be in charge. You can't be. That is the macho image you're supposed to have. Some of you perhaps watch Channel 9 and maybe watch Rumpole of the Bailey. I can almost hear Rumpole saying this if he was a member of Parliament. Well, we were elected to lead, not to be posters.
Now, how is the recall going to take place? It's going to be the American style to collect 10,000 signatures and then you can recall an MLA?
Well, you know the recommendations that we had made.
Can you briefly just tell me
I can only talk about the recommendations. The recommendations were that you will have recall without any grounds. You don't have to have any grounds for recall. Recalling an MLA. You can recall an MLA without any particular grounds, without any particular reason whatsoever.
And how are you going to recall?
Well, you sign up 50% plus one of the eligible voters on the list during the previous election, and you sign those up within, I believe it's a 2-month period. Once you have those signatures and they're verified by the chief electoral officer through a process that the chief electoral officer would develop, I mean, what we believe is that you elect an MLA for 4 or 5 years. Obviously, there has to be a groundswell of support for that MLA to be recalled.
Ujalto Sanch, what I'm saying is that the signature system is an outdated one because we have telephones with push buttons that we can register our code and register a vote without a signature. But